So today on the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast, for episode 26, I decided to interview my good friend Max. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Milwaukee Bucks. He's a diehard fan, has a lot of insight from their struggling days when he was younger to now when they are a legit NBA title contender. So enjoy. So today I would like to welcome the second official guest onto the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast, Max Antonneau.
How you doing, Jeff?
So, Max, for my podcasters who don't really know you, can you just introduce yourself a little, say what you're doing in school, stuff, kind of like what you want to do with your life?
Yeah, definitely. So, Jake Albertus, your first guest, he's my roommate. Jake and I are both managers like yourself with the team. So that's one of my primary involvements at Western right now. I'm also a part of a club called the Sports Business Association, helped get that club started up. So that's something I put a lot of time into. And then I'm also working at Willis Sports Agents, and so I intern there. And those are kind of my three things at Western, obviously a student as well. Kind of trying to get into the sports business side of things as opposed to coaching, but definitely keeping everything open. So really interested in sports just like yourself and Jake, and that's why I'm here today.
All right. So the main reason I had you on the podcast is you are from Wisconsin. You are a big Milwaukee Bucks fan.
Yes, sir.
And so we thought maybe, hey, we'll talk about the Bucks because they're very successful this year. Talk about kind of how your early memories, of the Bucks have been. So I guess where I'm trying to start this podcast is, what are your early memories of the Bucks?
Yeah, they go back quite a long ways, and they haven't always been as positive as they are right now. So probably my first Milwaukee Bucks related memory is a birthday party I went to of my cousin's back in like the Michael Redd days. I think I was probably 6 or 7.
He's Michael Redd from Ohio State.
Yeah, Michael Redd. That's back when he was an all-star. So those days weren't quite as bad as the like the 2013 days when we were winning 8-9 games, but wasn't always a pretty franchise in Milwaukee. Herb Cole was a good owner and everything, and definitely had the right intentions, but the team was at best contending for the 8 seed. And it was a good year if you got to the playoffs. So coming from that and then transferring sort of into that team who, like I said, was winning single-digit games. Obviously, those were tough years. That was kind of my high school, late middle school maybe. And so I remember telling you, Jeff, I went to a bunch of games in that year where we won we got the 2 pick and took Jabari. Mm-hmm. Before that year, I went to a bunch of games because of Larry Sanders' fan page on Twitter, who gave out tickets.
I never knew this.
I didn't tell you this?
I did not know you did not
tell me
this.
I told somebody. I forget who it was, maybe Jake. But they would give out tickets to anybody who guessed Larry Sanders trivia correctly. Mm-hmm. Well, my friend and I would always submit our guesses along with other people, and the fan page literally couldn't get rid of the tickets. So we would guess 5-6 times and never even get the right answer, and they would give us free tickets anyway because they couldn't give the tickets away.
Man, I knew that. That's crazy.
Yeah, dire times back in Milwaukee in like 13, 14. And I've been a fan, through all of it. Obviously, now is a much better time to be a Bucks fan.
Paid off, man. Paid off.
Yeah, it's all worked out really well, and I'm glad we did it kind of the right way as opposed to Philly tanking 5 years in a row or whatever it was. All worked out.
Yeah, that is a credit to the Bucks. They didn't really tank every year. They did their best to win games, whereas the 76ers obviously just lost. So, where you lived in Wisconsin, how far away from Milwaukee were you? So how accessible was it to get to games? Maybe besides that one year where you were getting the Larry Sanders fan page tickets.
Not super easy. I mean, it's about an hour and a half down south from where I lived in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. So definitely could make the drive and make the trip, but on a school night or something like that, it wasn't too easy. So weren't a whole lot of times where I did it. Like I said, that year where we were awful and Larry Sanders' fan page was giving me tickets, I was there a few times. But, I try to get to as many games as possible. I spent a year at Marquette, as you know, Jeff, and so that year I went to a good number of Bucks games. That was a great year to be a fan as well. But, definitely ties to Milwaukee and everything, and close enough that you can get to games. Mm-hmm. but not exactly my backyard.
Yep, that's kind of how it is for me. I'm in Jackson, which is about hour 15 from Detroit, so I kind of know what you mean in terms of location. So I want to jump to 2013 here, which is where I, as not a Bucks fan, would kind of say their, I guess, future changed. Granted, maybe they didn't know it was going to change, but in 2013, you obviously drafted Giannis with the 15th pick, and I know you follow the drafts pretty closely, especially when you were younger like this. What were your initial thoughts of Giannis? Obviously, you probably did not think he would be a soon-to-be two-time MVP, but kind of what were your first thoughts of the raw prospect out of Greece?
Yeah. So like I said, those years, those early 2010 years were kind of my middle school, high school years. So the 2012 draft, when we drafted John Henson, was the first draft where I remember like feeling I knew what we were doing kind of, and I knew what was going on, and just was old enough to sort of understand the draft. And so the John Henson pick was one I liked, but 13, I mean, a lot of people hadn't even heard of Giannis's name, and I wasn't a whole lot different than that. I remember seeing Giannis's name in the mock drafts, and he wasn't one of those names that I looked into too heavily. It seemed like it's just some random foreign guy.
That's like, sorry to interrupt you. That's kind of the hard thing with how like mock drafts are. Like, especially for me, I'm always seeing the foreign guys, and I'm like, well, they don't play in the United States, so you don't get to watch them on a night-to-night basis in college. So then you kind of have to. It's a big risk a lot of times. Obviously, we've seen the development of European players coming to the NBA and having success as of late.
Right.
Giannis is definitely one of them, but we have like Luka, who's coming to the league, Kristaps, but I know what you kind of mean. It's hard to, I guess, know what these guys are going to be.
Well, yeah, and especially at the age of whatever I was, 13 or 12, like that's not one of the names that I was interested in reading about, right? It's somebody, like you said, who we don't see, and so as a younger kid, I wasn't really informed on Giannis, and I wasn't driven to read about him or anything. But on draft night, obviously we all saw that long ass name come across the TV, and I was just as surprised and kind of confused as everyone else. Immediately went to my computer and watched some of those highlights, and a lot of people were skeptical after they did that too. A lot of people were skeptical even after watching the highlights and seeing him playing in like YMCA style gyms, and he's playing in the Greek C division, and why did we draft this guy? But you could see it. I could see it at least on the film. I remember raw as heck, but freakish athleticism even when he was 18 and only 6'9". A lot of people forget he grew quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, I could see it, and I was excited about it after watching the film, but never imagined it would be anything close to this.
Soon to be two-time MVP, obviously. He's having a great year. Yeah. So, also that year of 2013, that summer, this was a trade that at the time probably very minimal for a Bucks fan. You guys traded Brandon Jennings to the Detroit Pistons, which I'm a fan of, and we gave you guys Chris Middleton. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know the guy's name, a foreign center that never panned out.
Right. I think, did you mention Brandon Knight?
And Brandon Knight, yep, and Brandon Knight. Right. And the Chris Middleton was only a career best 6-point-a-game scorer with the Pistons. Yeah. And as a Pistons fan now, I'm like, why? But obviously the Bucks, he was kind of a throw-in in the deal in a way.
Totally a throw-in.
That's a huge, just kind of talk a little bit about that, because he's now a two-time All-Star, kind of Giannis's running mate, and is a very good basketball player.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it didn't feel like a meaningful trade. It was kind of the way we were ending that, like Brandon Jennings, Monte Ellis era. That was the significance of it at the time. I remember I remember the trade coming through and everything, and talking to my friends about it, and it was like, wow, this Brandon Jennings, Monte Ellis era is kind of over. You didn't think that throw-in that was Chris Middleton, who was just, you thought he'd be cut in a year, would turn into your second best player, who we'll talk about whether he's good enough to be a title contender, second best player, but two-time All-Star now. Again, that's like Giannis developing into what he developed into. I mean, we never thought Middleton would become this, and so obviously a savvy move by Hammond, John Hammond, our former GM, and Brandon Knight. A lot of people forget this too. I mean, his next season with the Bucks, that's when we had that awful season, like I said. But I mean, he was definitely a bright spot on that Bucks team. Averaged near 20 points a game, almost an all-star. So a great move. Yeah, that was definitely a great move because of Knight, but especially because of Middleton. I mean, one of the better shooters, one of the better 3-and-D guys in the league right now. A little more consistency come playoff time, hopefully this year. But yeah, I mean, Middleton's a huge part of why the Bucks are where they are today.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for fans because, especially me with being a Pistons fan, I have now seen us kind of give away Chris Middleton and Spencer Dinwiddie, who are two borderline. Spencer Dinwiddie this year without Kyrie could have been an all-star. Very good, but it's kind of hard for fans to understand that sometimes you just have to do that. But let's jump a few years. So now I'm pretty sure the Bucks have made the playoffs 4 consecutive years now.
Right.
This will be their 5th. They already are in the playoffs. So
already clinched.
Kind of, I'm going to go to last summer. You guys are coming off a playoff loss where you guys, people were starting to kind of question Giannis, Coming into the offseason, you had some decisions to make. You had one of the guys I want to talk about with this decisions were Malcolm Brogdon. I really liked Malcolm Brogdon. I thought he was a very good guy for the Bucks system. Out of Virginia, he was a 4-year guy. He was kind of the example that 4-year players coming into the draft were using as players that can make an instant impact.
Right.
And you guys, he was a restricted free agent, and you guys did not decide to match his offer. Or no, wait. You did. It was weird. They offered him a lot of money, but then he signed with the Bucks, and it was a sign-and trade.
It was a sign-and-trade, yep.
But I didn't think, I know I kind of worded that weird.
Oh, you're good.
You guys weren't trying to pay him the amount he was looking for in that. And so at the time, I thought that was going to be a really huge loss for you guys. And kind of what were your thoughts on that? Because he was starting to get close to maybe an all-star level type of player with the Bucks. So,
yeah, my thoughts, honestly, so we had to sign Bledsoe was expiring. Chris Middleton we had to re-up, and then there's Malcolm Brogdon. And so we knew that there wasn't going to be the money for all of them, especially when we thought Mirotic was somebody who would be re-signed too. It was a matter of who you re-sign. Who do you go and get? We also had to re-sign Brook Lopez. I forgot to mention that. So that's a long list of names. Somebody,
Absolutely.
There's not enough money to go around for somebody. And so when I had these discussions with friends of mine or whatever, when I have talked about this topic before, I always jump to who was the most replaceable, right? So Chris Middleton, your all-star, now 2-time all-star. Is he replaceable? Probably not. You probably couldn't have gotten somebody else out on the market for Middleton, so it's going to be hard to say you don't want to pay Middleton. Brook Lopez, a 7-foot 3-point shooter coming off one of the best years of his career, interior defender. How are you replacing Brook Lopez, right? That's not nearly as easy as it is to replace Malcolm Brogdon. And then Bledsoe, your point guard, you kind of had to make the decision between the two, Brogdon and Bledsoe. Personally, I preferred Bledsoe. Playoff time, that's another story. We'll talk about that in a minute again. But Malcolm Brogdon, I don't think that's a true point guard. He's definitely a good guard to have on your team, but he's a little bit slower, has a hard time defending the point guard position. So my justification for getting rid of or letting Malcolm Brogdon go is we couldn't possibly have paid for everybody.
Fair enough.
And so Malcolm Brogdon was by far the most replaceable, and we're seeing that now. Yeah. We're seeing that. So Wesley Matthews has easily stepped into the starting lineup and offered comparable production to Malcolm Brogdon, especially once you consider George Hill is in that rotation, Kyle Korver is in that rotation, Dante DiVincenzo has played quite well this year. So we're kind of playing Moneyball with it, right? We replaced Malcolm Brogdon with a number of guys who in totality replaced that Malcolm Brogdon production. I would honestly say they exceed it. Malcolm Brogdon obviously had that 50-40-90 year, and Chris Middleton's actually doing that right now, but I think we've replicated Brogdon's production as well as we possibly could have, probably even exceeded it, like I said. So I'm really happy with the way we handled it. I think there is no better way to handle last year's offseason. Talk about, paying Middleton. That's a tricky topic. But as far as how we handled the Brogdon signing or letting him walk, I think we did it perfectly.
Which is interesting because Malcolm Brogdon, he had a big injury back in late December this past year, and if he probably did not get hurt, a lot of people were saying he would have been an all-star over Chris Middleton, which kind of would have been ironic.
Yeah.
He's having a very good year with the Pacers. So, I mean, hey, it's good for both of them because the Bucks definitely don't seem to be losing him, like being affected by him based off how they're doing this year, and he's helping another team that's also going to be a playoff team. So, kind of for the last 5 minutes, I just want to talk about this year's team, get into the little playoff talk because you and I have differentiating opinions on the Bucks.
Yeah.
And so kind of right now, they're 53-9 today.
Right.
Ironically, they play one of their biggest games, I would say, of the year just
tonight.
Because of the hype. Top 2 teams in the NBA tonight play at Staples Center. So I guess kind of what you're seeing this year, like, give me like a minute talk about what this team has shown you that is different from last year's in terms of, like, you think they can win the title this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you have to talk about is experience. Last year, we were coming into that Toronto series with significantly less experience than we are now. Signed Kyle Korver, a guy who has finals experience, and I realize that's more of a role player, but the whole team, for the most part, was in that Toronto series last year. Obviously, the title-winning team fought hard. We were up 2-0, right? Ultimately, they win the series, but, I mean, they lose Kawhi, and here we are, like I said, with that experience from last year. Giannis playing even better. Middleton playing better, I would say, more consistently, too.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Bledsoe looking nice, I would say. Playoff time is a whole nother issue, but I think the big factor is experience, and obviously Kawhi being out of the East. Yeah. So that is why I think Milwaukee's the favorite for the East. Boston's got Jason Tatum, who's playing crazy right now, and Toronto's no slouch either. But I would say top to bottom, and this is something that I want us to do come playoff time, is use our bench and go more than 8 deep, go 9, 10, 11 even deep, because we've got the ability to do it, and we've got role players who offer different attributes, and so Kyle Korver needs to get in the game and offer that three-point shooting and that type of stuff. But anyway, crazy depth for the Bucks and now more experience. Like I said, Giannis playing at an even higher level. I think Mike Budenholzer comes up with some more offensive scheme to defeat the wall that we saw last year in the playoffs. And, I mean, let's face it, Kawhi being off the Raptors is
that's the best defender there was in the East last year.
Precisely,
for sure.
right, exactly. And I don't think Boston has the same bodies, by the way,
yeah,
as they did a year ago. So we'll see. I mean, we saw the wall last year brought out against Giannis and the Bucks, and I don't think either of the teams that everyone's talking about to rival the Bucks as the favorites out of the East have the same ability as they did a year ago to defend us. And like I said, we've improved offensively and we've got that experience. So I like where things are headed come playoff time.
So I kind of wanted to do this because you kind of brought him up. I think last week on one of my episodes talked about how I think, or why and how I think the Celtics are the best team in the East. And obviously you just said the Bucks, in your opinion, are the best team in the East. And by record and statistics and everything, the Bucks are the best team in the East. I just think in a 7-game playoff, right now it looks like Boston's going to be a 2 or a 3, and the Bucks are going to be a 1 unless they just
absolutely collapse.
Yeah, so that's not happening. It's not happening. I believe so. If the Celtics are either a 2 or 3, that means if they win their matchups, they would play in the Eastern Conference Finals. The push I'm going to make here for the Celtics is I believe they have enough scorers to kind of make it a shootout against the Bucks. And I know the Bucks are capable of scoring a lot of points.
Yeah.
I just think they have 4 guys that are above 18 a game. Tatum is playing at an elite, borderline MVP level the last month and a half.
MVP.
Hey, last month and a half, man. 30
month
plus.
And a half, maybe.
But I just think you can throw bodies where you have good defenders. Jaylen Brown's a very good defender. Yes, he's undersized, but I even saw him play the Lakers, and he took the challenge of guarding LeBron. Did pretty good against LeBron. You throw him at Giannis. You throw Daniel Tice, who is a very underrated defender. I just think that team bodes better for a 7-game series. Now, I want that series to happen because I think it will be good.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a crazy series. Obviously, that'd be a very exciting series to watch. One thing that you mentioned, Boston having the ability to hang with Milwaukee in terms of shooting and kind of having it be a shootout. One thing that I will say is a little bit concerning is the Bucks D is predicated on allowing teams to shoot threes. And so when we allow those, especially corner threes, to bleed, that gets a little bit concerning when you see a team like Boston who 1 through 5 can pretty much shoot it.
Yeah.
Again, though, like to kind of counter that, I mean, we've got very capable defenders everywhere. Eric Bledsoe, that's an All-NBA defender. Giannis Antetokounmpo, All-NBA defender. Brook Lopez, borderline All-NBA.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about guys who are
you do have very good
all
defenders.
3 of those guys are literally in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year at some point or another this season. So, yeah, I mean, that's the series everybody wants, I think. Toronto is close in that too, but yeah, it's going to be crazy to see what happens out east, and obviously has a lot of implications on where Giannis plays the rest of his career.
Very true. Well, this was fun. We have about a month and a half now to the playoffs,
Yes,
obviously. Sir. Maybe if we get this matchup that we kind of both want, maybe we should have another podcast about that. I'll kind of take the Celtics side, and we'll maybe just debate for a little episode. So thank you, Max.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Jeff.